Hello everyone, I am Aditya Vidhate, 2014 B5A70775H, a member of the alumni engagement team at BITSA and your host for this podcast. This episode is a part of COVID Talk series, an effort to address the current ongoing pandemic by introducing you to some awesome people from our BITS family, doing fantastic work to help us all cross this safely. Today, I'm in a conversation with one of the awesomest people whom a lot of you already recognize, Professor Suman Kapoor, Senior Professor at the Department of Biological Sciences at BITS Hyderabad, Dean of International Programs and Collaborations Division, recipient of the National Technology Award from the President of India, and innumerable more such prestigious awards. Professor Kapoor is what I would rightly like to call a serial innovator and has created a mouth sanitizer that provides protection against COVID. Let's know much more about this from the lady herself. Welcome to the podcast, Suman ma'am. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Aditya. Mouth sanitizer is a new term that we coined. Conventionally, we are all familiar
Right.
with mouth washes and oral rinses that a dentist prescribes for
Correct.
various dental kind of caries and bacterial diseases.
Yeah.
When the COVID pandemic started and everything got locked down and we were all at home and very closely following the spread of this disease, which at least in our lifetime is one of its kind,
Totally.
we found this extraordinary emphasis on sanitizing your hands. There were so many cues being given: wash your hands every 20 minutes or every 40 minutes, don't touch things. There are so many stories about how long the virus survives on various kinds of surfaces and all that. And as a biologist, it seemed that, okay, we are talking about washing hands because we can touch things which are positive for the virus, or we can touch surfaces. And there were huge movies being put across on how to bring your grocery home, how to desanitize it, and all that stuff.
Yes.
So we thought, okay, where does this virus grow? And by then it was evident. There were some reports in February from Korea that it initially establishes itself in the mouth, even though the root may go through the nose, but for first 7-8 days, it grows in the mouth. And then it travels down your respiratory passage to give rise to a more severe disease. Already it was visible that if you have a higher viral load in your mouth, you are more prone to a more serious disease. So we thought, why not sanitize the mouth itself, right? And see if we can kill the virus in the mouth, and from that point of view decrease the spread of this disease. And also, when you reduce the viral load, you can decrease the severity of the infected person. So the whole idea was actually thought over from, I think, 17th March to 31st March, when I first gave a small note to a media person, and it appeared in Indian Express and Deccan Chronicle, where it started. And interestingly, by then there were no studies on mouthwashes, and the first article that came in press in scientific literature was in May, trying to analyze, published from Cambridge, and trying to analyze how various components of mouthwash would actually work like an antiviral. And then we have looked now, we have come into June, July. We were doing a patent search in June and July, and the idea really picked up. There have been scientific studies on whether the existing mouthwashes can reduce the viral load. For how long do they reduce the viral load? And can you design a better mouthwash for decreasing the viral load in the mouth? That's exactly what we did. When you look at the drug journey, if you try to develop a drug, you need anywhere from 2 to 12 years to do all the clinical trials, animal studies, preclinical toxicity, then clinical studies. So for the whole month of April, we thought, what can we already select from an approved item, which would be antiviral, which has been used in humans for a very long time. So it is safe, and which would be easily available off the shelf as an ingredient which we can buy, so that we save time in standardizing the extraction procedure and all. And so I remember going through a whole lot of literature to see what are the antiviral compounds which are present in plant sources. And plant sources are used worldwide as medicinal herbs. We like it or not, WHO says 70% of the world population still uses
Yeah.
medicinal plants as the first home remedy that you would like. So it took us some time, but by April, we were ready with our list of ingredients. It was a huge challenge to buy those ingredients in the lockdown period. You couldn't order anything, nothing was being supplied. You couldn't yourself step out. I remember contacting another colleague who had an emergency travel pass because of his her own businesses. And I requested them, I have ordered these. Can you please ask your driver to pick them up for me and bring them to its campus? So the work started around end of April when we got our ingredients. And we've been on it since then.
Wow. Yeah, that's a very inspirational story. So Suman ma'am, what is so novel about the COVID virus? Like, what exactly makes it different from what the medical community has already dealt with before?
There are two very important aspects to COVID. One is, even though we have seen viral pandemics in the past, the biological understanding of viral infections was not where it is today. So if you look at the last large pandemic, which is erroneously called the Spanish flu, though it originated elsewhere, courtesy media which were reporting these cases, and the first media reports came from Spanish flu, Spain, and so it was called Spanish flu. The virus has a R0 number. R0 number is the number of people whom a single infected person can transmit the disease to. And this virus had an R0 number of highest number of 2.4. So one infected person could infect 2.5 more people. Whereas COVID, when it was at its peak in France and Spain, the R0 number was as high as 6. Even now, many parts of the world, the R0 number is around 2.5. Though some countries like Estonia and all have it around 1.4. India is also around 1.4. So when an R0 number is above 1, then it is a epidemic or a pandemic. Pandemic because it is across countries, but epidemic because it's killing more than the average number of people who would have died of various causes at that time. That is one part. So COVID has a very high R0 number, and from whatever genomic studies that have been done, the virus is still evolving. Again, in the past, for Spanish flu, there was a bigger killer wave when the second wave of Spanish flu came. There were fewer people who died in the first wave. There were more people who died in the second wave because the virus had evolved to a more virulent type, killing people within 24 hours of symptoms onset. Luckily, COVID is not like that. It gives you more than 15 days. Most of the people who are COVID infected are asymptomatic and will come out of it unscathed. But we will yet to see whether we'll have a second wave or not, whether we are past the first wave as yet. I don't think we are past the first wave. So some bit of biology will emerge on how to deal with viral infection. In the past pandemics, all kinds of viruses except those which happened from 2002 onwards, we've never had any antiviral drugs with us. Now we do have. So that makes it a difference. It gives us the confidence that we can still repurpose other antiviral drugs to treat this disease. And in case of Spanish flu, we never even had antibiotics. So mostly viral infection is accompanied with bacterial pneumonia or bacterial infection, and you have to treat alongside with antibiotics. Again, we have an arsenal of antibiotics today. So the more we understand about this disease, we'll be able to manage it better. So hopefully the genomic studies will give us a vaccine in a shorter time. The arsenal of antiviral drugs and antibacterial drugs will give us a therapeutic approach to deal with. And I think The last bit is how we manage and track the spread, which was also not possible in the 1900s. Today we have data which can be monitored real time. Look at the dashboard that John Hopkins has created, where you can actually monitor how many people in which country and what is the death rate, where is it going day to day. So I think we are much better equipped today to look at this disease. The unfortunate part is we still don't have a therapeutic protocol for it. We've not been able to save many people who have gone gravely sick and we've lost them.
Yeah, that's a very scary thought, right? That the virus could mutate and there'd be a second wave. I'll
There
probably
could be.
touch on that later once.
Yes.
So you told me this amazing story about, right, how you thought about making a mouth sanitizer and how you procured the materials, etc. And I know for a fact, like being in BITS Hyderabad, I think during the time when you were receiving a lot of awards and having worked with you a bit, I know for a fact that you are a very high functioning innovator. So looking at your other products in the space of antibiotics and diabetes, etc. So a side question, what are the most important resources for an individual that leads her to innovation? Uh, what's your process?
See, if it's all about listening to a lot of things going around you and then being able to connect the dots and pivot from one platform to another. So every entrepreneur has done that in their life, right? When we were envisaging this mouthwash, I was also a member of another team which was writing a big DST grant for a PCR based diagnosis of COVID 19, which was very conventional. RT-PCR is the only method, or you can do an isothermal PCR. However, that's something that everyone was doing. We also proposed it to DST. Nobody has ever thought of mouth sanitizers as antiviral products, as public health tools. They are all individual oral health tools. They are not public health tools. So it takes a mind to be courageous enough to suggest something and to pivot from a technology platform to fill in a societal demand, identify the gap and fill in that societal demand. I think that's the most important feature of an innovator, who's able to foresee and definitely be courageous enough to say, yes, this can be done.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually. And yeah, courage is a very big thing, definitely. So coming back to COVID and your product, right? So how exactly is sanitizing your mouth helpful? Like you could go into details about what exactly is the product doing. Have you run any trials to measure the effectiveness of the product?
Right. So when you look at the structure of this virus, which came out very early in February, it was evident that it is an RNA virus, single-stranded RNA virus with a lipid envelope. And if you are able to disrupt the lipid envelope, you're able to inactivate the virus, which is the basis of frequent hand sanitization. So we looked for phytoconstituents which can disrupt the lipid envelope of the virus. And the logic was that if these phytoconstituents are safe to use, then we could disrupt the lipid envelope of the virus that is inside the mouth.
Essentially
So
doing what
we,
soap does, but inside your mouth.
what soap does to the hand, exactly. So then the question boiled down to the fact that what are those constituents? Fortunately, there's a lot of literature on phytoconstituents. There's a lot of interest on nutraceuticals today. So we were able to identify a list of 20 plants. We were able to procure 14 only out of them. All 20 were not available during that time. And then we tested them for their ability to disrupt lipid membranes. We also know from biology that the virus acquires the membrane from the cell in which it is growing. It takes a piece of the cell membrane as an envelope with it when it is released from the dying cell. So it was easy to monitor it in the lab. We all culture cells in the lab. So you can actually see the effect of the phytoconstituents on the membrane of the cell. So we made this and then developed 7 different formulations, and we have tested them against a viral model in vitro in the lab, where we have tested all of them. You incubate the virus with the formulation that we have designed, and then wash away the formulation and put it onto a host cell. If the virus has been inactivated, it will not be able to enter the cell and then not be able to kill the cell or replicate inside the cell. In the lab, it is all the 7 disrupt the membrane, but against the virus, I have results for 3, and it was very encouraging to see that all the 3 formulations were able to inactivate virus in a very short time, within 15 seconds and 100%. So we had this confidence that most people use a mouthwash for less than a minute in their mouth.
Yeah.
So we should not necessitate anybody to hold the mouthwash or rinse material in the mouth for a longer time. It's not possible practically. And it was nice to see that in a very short incubation, it was able to inactivate all the viruses in vitro. I have also initiated an in vivo study in SARS-CoV-2 positive individuals who are under quarantine, and they have to undergo quantitation of the viral load in their mouth before they can come out of the quarantine period till they become RT-PCR negative. So we are now seeing that if such patients are asked to use this as a mouthwash, can we reduce the quarantine time? Will they become RT-PCR negative sooner? And I'm very confident the result will be very good. We are talking to several hospitals and contract research centers to conduct those in vivo studies. But the in vitro studies are extremely encouraging, and the best part is all the ingredients are already used for humans. Our nutraceuticals are permitted to be added as supplements in your food, so I don't have to do any toxicity studies. So Alumni Affairs, BITSA is also trying to raise funds for the in vivo studies in human subjects.
So biologically speaking, you have a virus cell which has a lipid layer around it, and just dissolving that lipid layer makes the virus inactive.
Absolutely.
Is it right to say that the lipid layer is the one that binds to your cell and allows the genetic material to enter?
Absolutely. Yes. But 2 things. The lipid layer holds certain proteins also, which are in viruses, in case of coronaviruses, are called spike proteins. So when the virus comes in contact with the human cell, the spike protein finds a receptor for itself. And again, in case of COVID-19, that receptor has been identified as ACE2 receptor,
Right.
which is present in almost all types of cells, ACE2 receptor. So, but when you disrupt the lipid layer, the spike protein also falls off.
Right.
Because the spike protein is held in the lipid envelope. And inside there is a single-stranded RNA which will not be able to find its way into the cell.
Correct.
There's no other way to transport that inside.
So exactly. So my question was this, right? So how many, how vast a study do you have to do on actual patients to, let's say, get this product into market?
So ideally, I can get this product into market immediately, because in vitro studies will allow me to put this product on market, and I have already applied for large-scale manufacturing license. Wow. As soon as it comes, we are ready to scale up. So it will be less than 4 weeks when we are ready to scale up. But scaling up needs many more things also, which is what we are working on currently, on finding a partner who can make large amounts of the mouthwash and put it on the market.
That's amazing. So a side question, are you also like focusing on, I know this is un-COVID related, but are you also focusing on like the aesthetics of the product? Like it should smell good, etc. Or like how do you encourage people to put it into their mouths?
Very true. So there will be 2 things which will encourage it. One is definitely the fact that it is antiviral. No other mouthwash has a strong antiviral activity. The second most common mouthwash, which is iodine providine mouthwash, comes with a warning not to be ingested
Right.
because it causes ulcers in your gastric tract. Right? Here is a product that even if you ingest, it's not going to harm you. If at all, from the point of view of Ayurveda and other alternate medicine approaches, it's going to boost your immunity. There's a second advantage, but I haven't done that as yet. So I don't say that. Okay. But it
So,
is not harmful if ingested.
all right.
That
But
is
you
one
wouldn't
important part.
recommend that it be ingested.
No, I'm not going to do that immediately till I have the in vivo study results. That so how what would be the scale of that study?
All
In
right.
general, for a detection of viral load reduction, we need to do this study only in 24 subjects.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I lose a few to follow up, maybe 30 subjects need
Right.
to be recruited and they need to use this mouthwash 4 times a day to begin with to determine the extent of reduction of viral load. And I am very confident that they will have drastic reduction in viral load within 2 to 3 days of use.
That's
But
amazing.
it definitely needs to be seen as it
Exactly.
pans out
Yeah.
in the human subject. So the study is very short, 30 subjects in a country which is going through peak of its COVID-19 cases
Yeah.
should be recruited within a week. And if every subject becomes negative in 3 days, it's probably a 2 week, 3 week study, not very long. It is being stepwise, it's being followed so that where to do it, how to get permissions to do the human trials, who will do it, how much will it cost, all that is underway. It is under discussion at this time.
All right. So, two questions come to my mind. One is like, could you simply tell me how long will it take for, let's say,
4 weeks.
for two things. For one, for me, let's say being in Bangalore to see the product on a shelf in Bangalore, and
Mhm,
one
mhm.
for like you to get the approval to begin manufacturing the product.
The approval time, I think, will be about 2 weeks.
Okay.
Especially for COVID-19, the government of India has accelerated the approval process. You might have seen many diagnostic kits were given an approval within 5 to 10 days. So I don't think the approval process will take more than 2 weeks. And add another 3 weeks for me to do my trials. The product should be on the shelf in a market in about 6 weeks' time. I am already parallelly processing on who would make this, who would package it for me, and what would be the quality SOPs that they need to follow when they put this product out. So I don't think it'll take too long, but maybe 2 months from now. Yeah. You would
Uh,
be happy to note that we are trying to do COVID diagnostics on Right Biotic now.
oh wow, how do you do
That's
that?
another project we are
I
doing.
thought Right Biotic was more based towards bacterial infections. How do you get
It
viral
is. So we are
infections?
going to repurpose that
Oh
technology
wow.
for viral detection
Oh wow, that's amazing.
and
But
independent of doing the PCR.
okay, so if I remember correctly, right, the purpose of Right Biotic was to find out what bacterial infection you have and to find
Yes,
out which drug, which antibiotic is the most effective against your particular infection, sort of like a step
absolutely.
towards custom medicine. Uh,
Yes.
but how do you do that for COVID? Because as far as I understand, there's only one COVID strand, right? At least right now.
So you just have to detect the viral RNA
Okay.
and say yes, the person has viral RNA or no, the person doesn't have viral RNA
Oh,
using
okay.
the oral swab only. Yes, only diagnostics.
Understood.
And
Yeah.
reducing the dependence on RT-PCR machine, which is
Mm-hmm.
much more expensive,
Mm-hmm.
reducing the dependence on molecular biology methods, which needs special training, which is very difficult in India. You
Yep.
might have read there were some 33,000 samples discarded in Telangana because the samples were not collected properly.
Yep.
So it's a big challenge to do it everywhere in India. So we want to again take it to the field and do the test wherever the patient is.
And I also remember that bacterial infections test on a Right Biotic machine would take 4 hours. So
Yes, exactly.
how long will the COVID test take like what is the turnaround time for Rightbiotic on how much do you
1 hour or 45 minutes.
Wow,
1 hour or 45 minutes.
Okay. So again, going back to Rightbiotic, Rightbiotic works on the principle that you form a culture of the strain of infection that you have, and then you have a very high functioning camera over there to detect that infection. So is the same logic being followed for?
The detection is through the same logic.
Okay.
The end product and color is the same.
Okay.
But we are using immobilized host cells to capture the virus from the oral swab and allow the virus to replicate in the cell during the transit time from where the sample is collected to where it is brought.
Wow, that's very, very smart.
And then isolate RNA and do the detection. The amplification is in vivo inside the cell.
Yeah, that's very smart. That's what I was wondering. So I was wondering what takes bacteria 4 hours to form enough population to be detected, whereas virus it's taking just 1 hour. And yeah, that solves the problem. The transport time is where it actually replicates, and wow,
it'll amplify itself.
Nice.
Right.
So another question about what we were talking about earlier is
COVID.
Yes, COVID. So the mouth sanitizer. So I mean, I don't know if I'm correct saying this, but there'll be patients of different severities. Like one could be an extremely severe symptomatic patient, and other could be on other end of the scale is extremely asymptomatic patient who doesn't even know he or she has COVID. So at what positions on the scale is using the mouth sanitizer recommended? Like, can a very severe patient also use it?
I would not recommend that at this time. Maybe after the in vivo studies, when I have concrete data that it reduces viral load growing inside the mouth, then maybe it's not a bad idea as an adjunct supplement to normal medication for a severely sick patient.
Right.
But for asymptomatic, it is very good because it is now very well established that asymptomatic people do not cough, do not sneeze, but shed the particles when they talk. So if the mouth viral load is reduced, they will shed fewer particles. So the transmission will not happen as often as it happens. And mildly symptomatic patients have already progressed to a slightly increased number of viral load. So again, if you can check the viral load, maybe they will not progress to severely sick disease.
Yeah.
Right. So I would at the beginning propose to use this to be used by asymptomatic and mildly symptomatic people who are not under active medical treatment or medication. Right. And hope that they never go to the severe case.
Yeah.
They never progress to the severe stage. Yeah. That's where this would be most useful.
Definitely. And another curious question that I get, so does brushing your teeth also have a similar effect that mouth sanitizer would have?
So the location of viral growth is the top of your tongue, the mucosal lining, the upper surface of your tongue, and from there you swallow it and then it reaches through the throat to the respiratory passage. Even from the nose, what drips into your nasopharynx is then traveling to your respiratory passage. So even an oral rinse or a brushing process will transiently reduce the virus numbers, right? However, water alone is not enough to disrupt the lipid envelope. And none of the toothpastes have that kind of an ability. Right? What I was telling you, this Korean study of using providin iodine, they've shown it reduces viral load, which comes back within 2 hours. So that's the kind of passive effect it will have. Unless you can kill all the viruses that are in the mouth at that time. Right. And you can then use it repeatedly to kill all of them for the first 1 or 2 days so that the viral load drastically reduces.
Virus is, I think, one of the most robust. I don't even know if I should call it a creature. It isn't living until it is living.
I call them Brahmaji's genetic tools.
All right. So coming back to COVID, how, according to you, will the pandemic come to an end? And when do you estimate that the pandemic comes to an end?
So, if you look at past viral pandemics, they have existed for nearly 2 years before they came to a natural end for that. And if you look at just a simple viral disease like dengue, which has been around in many countries, our attempt to develop a vaccine for that has not survived or fructified as yet. People are still attempting to develop a vaccine. So, at most, what people say, this is going to be around with us for 2 years, and we will have to adapt our life around that. How we must not forget that medicine has also made great strides in understanding and developing vaccines, developing new drugs. As we talk today, there is a drug which was not an antiviral drug but discovered through in silico methods to work against this virus and immediately pushed into clinical trial. So there are much better scientific tools at our disposal today, but still it will be about 1.5 years. Japan and all have come back to their normal life with a mask, and Japanese culture is naturally a culture which keeps a little distance from people. Unlike the European culture, close hugs and all, Japanese don't do that. And in that sense, I think we see from that country that the death number, the epidemic has not been so large in that country. So adopting that kind of lifestyle will bring us back to a near normal life in early part of next year, maybe March 21 or so. We should all be back into our due course of life as we know it.
Mm-hmm.
That's my expectation. And that's assuming that we will not have a second wave. And if we have a second wave, we will also have a vaccine ready for it.
Yeah, that this is the place in the podcast where I saved the second wave question for. So if there is a second wave, then what happens? Like, are we essentially looking at surviving our entire lives with this virus? Like, does it become like, at some point, does it become like dengue, for example?
So if you see H1N1, which was the first pandemic,
Right.
1918, my medical friends tell me they still see occasional cases of H1N1, but there are very few, right? Even the SARS-CoV-1 has not vanished. Even the MERS has not vanished. It's only that the incidence is much lower. And if you look at polio, which is again an vaccine which has worked in eradicating polio, the same way if you have a vaccine, then second wave or not, maybe many of us will be protected. It may be possible that we may have to take booster doses of the vaccine because the vaccine response, immune response may be short-lived. But then I have still gone over my risk for severe disease. I wouldn't be bedridden, I wouldn't be hospitalized. And if there is a second wave, I'll go for a booster. Or in the case of Spanish flu, there were 4 waves, though third and fourth were many minimal in size. So we are hoping that this virus will also behave the same way, and the vaccine will crucially play a big role in controlling the spread. I think we have put some very good non-pharmacological measures also in place, such as stopping the global travel, such as stopping the gatherings, large gatherings, limiting the number of people in public places. And they've all been accepted by the public in a good spirit for their own benefit. We might continue with some of that for a little longer, till all of us are exposed and have what is called herd immunity, and then we are safe after that.
Right. So you've actually just went around the point that I was going to get. So right now, like, travel is restricted. People are living in lockdown, etc. I do not have numbers on this, but I estimate that a collateral damage, I mean, this is a good thing that we are doing, definitely, because we are sort of reducing the incidence of the virus. But I think there's a collateral damage where we might be breeding a huge mental health issue amongst all of us, because
Yes.
people have stopped their social lives entirely. And no matter
Yes.
what we say, I mean, social lives is what keeps a certain emotional health afloat. So
Very important.
what do you think, how much are we looking at a mental health impact on
So
this? I
you
mean, it's a
started
different.
with saying you don't have the numbers, but I can give you the numbers.
Okay.
Today's numbers show that 1 in 7 people have some kind of a mental health issue that they are dealing with. So it is already a very large scale today because of the kind of fast paced life that people have adopted, or various different kind of stresses that we go through. And we have come a long way from being a largely family and community supported society to today a society which depends on more extrovert ways, more social platforms, more outdoor activities, and more public visibility. So it's definitely going to cause a lot of harm. Not only that, not only just the social distancing or our normal life, social life that is disrupted. I was talking to somebody who's 60 years of age and forced to work from home, and he says, and he's a vice president of a large company. He says, for the first time, I'm realizing that the work community has a role in my mental health. My colleagues in office have a role in my mental health. I'm
Yeah.
forced to work at home and sit with my 2 kids and my wife, and that's not always the best situation. So it is going to take a mental toll. And I think it will also impact on how we look at mental health. There
Mm-hmm.
is an age old adage that a person should be talking at least about 2,000 words with somebody in a day to be mentally stable. And that's not going to happen soon, especially for older people, for people those who are living alone, for families who are forced to stay apart because of employment and all. Add unemployment to it. In India alone, 19th July, there was a press news which said 122 million have lost their jobs. And that is going to impact not just the person who's lost job, but their family, the whole lot of people who depend on them. So the stress is going to be very, very large. And this whole thing probably will push us towards what is called a holistic wellness concept. There is a very minor difference between dis-ease and ease. Separate the two words. Ease and dis-ease. Ease is more to do with your emotional health and mental health in all situations. And you lose that ease, you invite disease for yourself. This stress is going to cause a whole lot of change in our life. It will need a lot of support system to be developed in the society. It will not only need support system, it will need rehabilitation for a lot of people. Many people who have lost jobs will have to reskill themselves
Yep.
for a new set of jobs, right? With this working from home, this digital world is going to demand a different set of skill sets from people than what they were doing till now. So continuous learning, good support system not only dependent on your family, but friends and others in the society. Some empathy towards the fact that people have gone through tough times and what can you share and do with them. But I do agree with you that it will be a huge wave of mental needs among these people who are, especially among the young people. I keep getting calls from people, those who are looking for new jobs, what's going to happen to them.
Yep.
Or they have been given a place, they have got a placement, and but they've been asked to sit home because there's nothing, nobody can open up. So there are demands which are going to cause anxiety. But I'm sure that we will develop systems where we can support these people to be less anxious and accept things as they come.
Yeah.
That concept of wellness will come in a big way after this. Very true.
Yeah, I think there needs to be a strong effort towards this, uh, along with all the vaccines, etc., all the therapeutic needs for COVID. Even apart from that, I think we would require some long hauling for the mental health to come back
Yes,
to
we will.
normal.
Right, right.
Yeah, that was amazing, Suman ma'am. So that's the end of the questions that I have. And it was an amazing conversation, very insightful on many things about the biology of the virus, the product that you have. Really excited for the product. It has been amazing. Do you have anything to say to our audience?
Yes, I have two things, and I am hoping that a lot of our audience and all of them are going to be Vitsians.
Yeah,
So I always would like to impart this message to all the Vitsians that they take a resolve that they can and they will do things. You know, it's just not that it can be done; they will also do this. You'll be amazed to hear that a student who's doing an off-campus thesis in Germany is is told by a colleague, and I have the whole of this as an email with me, that it had to be an Indian to come up with a solution for COVID-19. You know, because he saw the press news. So if you intend, if you decide, execute your ideas, you will succeed. And the second message, which is wider and more related to COVID-19, I invite every member listening to me today to become a team member in this journey and take a stake in this venture.
that's amazing.
Thank you.
How can we do that?
You can buy equity. There's a startup.
Thanks a lot, Suman ma'am, and thank
Thank
you
you
to our
so
audience
much.
also. And I hope all of you do your responsibility bit and stay home and stay safe and take all precautions. Thank you so much,
Yes.
Suman ma'am. Bitsa is really happy to host you, and I especially am very pleasured to have had this conversation with you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And anybody who would like to know more, please feel free to write to me or pick up the phone and talk to me.